week, ladies and gentlemen. Another versus here. And this is just to see who is the best pure wrestler in wrestling profession. I'm bringing out two of them. Bob Backlund, Bret Hart. Who is the better of the two? Now, of course, these guys came at different time periods. Let's be honest here. Even though they did match each other a few times throughout the years, particularly in the 90s and a couple of times in the mid to late 80s. These two did at least have one or two matches. But the point here is, who is the best wrestler? Now, I know that's kind of being a little objective because both of them went through All-State. I believe both of them were one of the best they had in their divisions. So, doing that, you could say it was Bob Backlund because he has a much more better background than Bret Hart. But I'm going to add in their own history, their own talking points, everything like that. Let me start with Bob Backlund. Because to me, and I am biased, between him and Bret Hart, I do believe he's the better wrestler. But I am being objective here, and I'm going to see them both objectively. Because they're both almost in the same era easily, I'm going to give it directly the best it can be. Now, Bob Backlund, I believe he worked in AWA with Pat Patterson. And I could be wrong, or it could have been Classy Freddie Blassie, who was at the time running the AWA. I could be wrong. I don't think it was the NWA at the time. You guys can tell me below. I'd like to know. But when I believe it was Pat Patterson, before he went over to WWF, he went to Vince, they were talking, and said pretty much, I got this guy here, he's a great wrestler. This is the late 60s, early 70s. I'm saying this right now. He said, I got a great wrestler here, but you know what? He just doesn't have charisma. He can't have my championship. It ain't gonna happen. Vince said, Vince Jr., give him to me, I will make him my champion, and he will get over. And he did for 4 to 5 years, I believe. I can't remember exactly, between 4 to 6 years, I think. I think it was 6 years, but I could be wrong. But he was their champion for at least nearly 6 years, and the people loved him. He was the person I first saw as a little boy, maybe about 8 or 9 years old, 1978 or 1980. That was the person I saw. Between 8 to 10 years old, that's my most fondest memory of the first person I can think of is Bob Backlund. Of course, there was Bruno Sammartino, there was the Iron Sheik, there was the Sheik. I've seen them a little bit as a kid, but I do remember vividly it was Bob Backlund who I loved the most. He did work with the WWE for quite a while, until about mid-86, I believe, or 88. And then I didn't see him for a while. Now, by 1991, I had stopped watching the product. But I did catch him at least once or twice, and someone was on WWE. It was either the Vince himself, or it was Mean Gene, or the Gorilla Monsoon, saying that he wants to become president. I remember something about that. It was so weird, and he had, I think I saw that speak saying, I will make sure the WWF is the lead of the professional wrestling. Vote me for president. Vote me as a champion. I will succeed. The crazy Mr. Bob Backlund was born then. And after that, for a little bit, he was gone. Until he came back when he was finally inducted into the Hall of Fame. Well, he did come back at Raw 1000. Then he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I was so happy that he was inducted. He deserved it. The man deserved it, and I'm okay with that. For his work in the ring, he worked against everyone. He worked against the Sheik, the Iron Sheik, Bruno Sammartino. That's how he won the belt. I believe he went up against Hulk Hogan a couple of times. He went up, obviously, against Bret Hart. He went up against, Jake the Snake Roberts. I even think, briefly, he did work with Macho Man Randy Savage. That could have been right when he left. I'm not exactly sure. You guys can tell me below. But he did work with almost everyone. And I also think he even worked with Andre the Giant. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. But he worked with the gala of everyone. And that made him such a very, even though he was a very monotone voice, he wasn't really a great talker. but he let his work in the ring speak for himself. Now, since I am talking about speaking for himself, Bret Hart, Stu Hart's son, one of 12 children, I believe. That man was busy with his wife. Woo! And he himself was a great wrestler. He started Stampede Wrestling. His son, Brent, also Owen, and what was his name? There was several sons. Dean Hart, I believe he had a son named Dean Hart. I cannot track all those kids. There was just too many. But essentially, all his kids went through, most of them went through wrestling to one point or another. Either working in the back or actually working in the ring. Brent, he did basic amateur wrestling in high school. Then he went to professional wrestling. Eventually, he worked with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And you know what happened with the Hart Foundation. You know how it was with Jimmy Hart. You know that he managed to do such a great work in the Hart Foundation. Then when he broke off on his own, he wrestled his brother. He wrestled the British Bulldog. He wrestled the one who would not be named in WCW. And eventually, well, he didn't really wrestle anywhere else. He did wrestle in WCW. He did. That was after Owen's death and before it and after it. But the point is, he wrestled a lot of people. He wrestled Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't know if he had a chance to wrestle The Rock. He might have. He wrestled, of course, Shawn Michaels. He wrestled so many people over the years. And I really felt that he was one of the most underrated wrestlers. Not talking about the best all-around wrestler. At one point, an underrated wrestler until he was really on his own. Then he became one of the best complete wrestlers. I'm not really talking about his talking ability. He didn't have it. He improved to a point, but you got my point. Being able to work in the ring, being able to put people over to a certain extent, and we are still talking about, let's be honest, there's always politicking, and he did it just like everybody else, just like Mr. Backlund did. But in general, as an all-around pro wrestler, he was pretty good. He was at least a 4-tool guy, just like Mr. Bob Backlund was a 4-tool guy. He was. But now, who do you think would be the best person to be the best pure wrestler? Now, they both were pretty well matched. And at one point, they did match each other. Admittedly, Bob Backlund is a bit older than him. So by the time they started wrestling, Bob Backlund was already on the decline. But if you look at Bob Backlund when he was young compared to Bob Backlund when he was old, there isn't that much of a difference. Bob was still in tremendous shape. So I could say that whenever they did match each other, even though he was on the decline, excuse me, my allergies are killing me, Bob Backlund was still very good. But if the younger Bob Backlund was dealing with a young Bret Hart, I gotta say they're pretty evenly matched. Now, if you're talking about all the 5 tools that makes a wrestler, a good physique, good in-ring presence, good in-ring ability, being able to talk, things like that, you could say they're both 4. Easily. Both of them, well, they're both about the same size. So they're mid-range wrestlers. They're not big wrestlers. Both of them were mid-range wrestlers. Both of them have a decent physique. I think Bob Backlund's physique was a little bit more cut. But not by much. Because he wasn't like buffed. He was cut to a point. Bret Hart was never a cut guy. But he did stay in good shape. The in-ring work, both of them were excellent. The in-ring ability, both of them were excellent. Talking, not that good. Bob Backlund was never a big talker. And Brent usually had Jim the Anvil Neidhart and also Jimmy Hart to talk for him. So I gotta say, by the time he was on his own, he did talk for himself. I'm gonna say Bret Hart is a better talker. For the simple fact that when it came to Bob Backlund, he didn't do a lot of talking. That was never his strong suit. Vince made sure he didn't talk much. And he made sure whoever talked with him talked for him most of the time. So Bret Hart, I gotta say, as a talker would be better. Also, having some type of storyline, by the time Bob Backlund left, he wasn't really in any major storylines. Bret Hart was, dealing with his brother Owen, dealing with the British Bulldog, dealing with Shawn Michaels is one of the best types of storylines they have. So I gotta say, between them both, Bret had the better storyline and also had more better talking. Only because at the time in the 70s and the early 80s, when you're not good at talking, they wouldn't usually give you the mic. By the near the late 80s into the early 90s, that's when they started really trying to make people force them to talk much more, especially for Bret. So, who is the better pure wrestler? They're both dead even. But I do believe, this is my own personal preference, that Bob Backlund was slightly better. Because, to be honest, he went against the gala of all the people that were still in their prime. Like I said, Andre the Giant was still in their prime when he was facing him. Hulk Hogan was in his early prime. The Iron Sheik, the Sheik, I believe he even went up against superstar Jimmy Graham. He went up against Brutus the Barber Beefcake, I think, at one point. Tito Santana. A lot of these guys match one another. So, as a pure wrestler, I believe Bob Backlund's had more experience because he had more time to work with the most popular wrestlers. Bret Hart, by the time he came up, most of those wrestlers were already beginning to retire. So it was a little too late for them to really deal with him. But it doesn't mean he didn't go up against some of the best tag teams or some of the best wrestlers. I think he just didn't have a chance to catch up with them. So as a pure wrestler, Bob Backlund's better. But as an all-around wrestler, I got to give the edge to Bret Hart, even though I really still love Mr. Bob Backlund. Because he had a chance to be in some of the 3 best storylines that WWE ever had. He had a chance to talk more. And that's something you don't normally get back in the 70s and 60s and 80s if you weren't a very good talker. They would hide that. So tell me below who you think between these two is the better. As a 5'2" or 4'2" guy, as a pure wrestler, or as many people would think, seen on television, movies, whatever. So I hope you enjoyed this debate of the week. Please give me a comment below. Tell me what you would love to see next. And I hope to see you soon. Peace out.